Well, I started working on the water many moons ago. I was actually in my early 20s, and it was kind of just, a lot of my life has happened by chance. It's like it hasn't necessarily been a plan. I started working in Haida Gwaii, and I worked at a number of different resorts up there, and I ended up being up there for about 10 years, and I got into fishing as a sport was all I did for a decade of my life, from salmon fishing on the ocean to spey fishing in the rivers, and that's how I got started. I was a mountain girl. I was snowboarding, skiing. That's kind of what I did, and so it was my first time being on the water and experiencing this nautical way of life. And basically, I started in the lodges. Actually, I was serving, and then I worked my way onto the docks. And then from there, and this was kind of near the end of my stint, the end of the, I don't know, it was like 8 to 10 years up there, I started to get into guiding. And I was getting that opportunity, and that's all I wanted to do for a really long time because I loved fishing so much, and it was so magical. And it's when you're into the sport too, it's quite an adrenaline rush, especially with those really big taiis that they have out there, the giant Chinook. So yeah, anyways, I got into it, and at that point, I left Haida Gwaii, and I kind of have, it's funny because it was the thing I always wanted to do, but then once I started doing it, it wasn't fulfilling me in the way that I thought it would. And that was simply because of kind of what was happening to the salmon. I had been so inspired by salmon for that 10 years that I was up there, just being the foundation of the food chain, just this precious life-giving force, really, that's what salmon are. And yeah, so I just ended up not really wanting to fish as much anymore. And so I was like, hey, what am I going to do? So maybe I can work to, protect salmon instead of just being like fishing for them for sport and for food. And so I went back to college in Vancouver, and I went into a fisheries program. It's a fish and wildlife program. And my whole plan was to become a fisheries technician or a fisheries biologist, so that I could help figure out what was going on with salmon, why they were disappearing, why they were having such a hard time, because they are the foundation, of everything we love and see and do out here. So a big part of my life was, kind of guided by salmon and just how inspiring they are. Campbell River specifically is, it's got the nickname River City and the salmon capital of the world because they had some of the biggest taiis caught here and big salmon runs of all the main 5 species. It's the foundation of all that we do and all that we love out here. The bears depend on them. The grizzly bears, the black bears, the whales. Yeah, it's just an absolutely stunning place, and it's because of our wild salmon. luckily, I just randomly got a job at a resort out here in the Discovery Islands as an eco tour guide because of my background, as a guide in the past, and my background in fisheries and wildlife with my college degree. So that's how I ended up coming to the Discovery Islands. It was just a job that I got, and then I just switched gears completely. And I was so passionate about, the coast and the fish and the wildlife, and I just decided that was my calling. My vocation was to share these stories and life histories of the wildlife out here and the salmon with my guests, so that they, could fall in love even more with wildlife and also know what to do to support and nurture, that balance in nature. So I started Wild Waterways Adventures about 2 years ago now. We're in our second season. And the way that happened was, again, it was just being in that flow of guiding and working for other companies in the Discovery Islands. And I went to the North Broughton Archipelago, and I was working for all these people in these beautiful places. And, after a while, I was just like, I realized that I was helping build someone else's dreams. I was helping, create somebody else's vision. And then it came to me one day that, I can create my own vision. I have a vision. I have something really special to share, and I want to do this for myself. And so, I kind of took what I learned from all these other places that I worked, and, my passion for nature and for, the balance, that we have out here and the beauty. And I just decided, I was like, that's it. I just made a decision, and it was really quick, actually. Here we are. Yeah. Just living the dream, basically. My vision, one thing I really wanted to do was to connect people. It sounds kind of cheesy, but it's true, like at the level of the heart with nature. And I mean, it's very easy with nature. You can take the most uptick type people, and they can look at a whale and you can just watch their energy shift so easily. But you can take it another step further. If you have a really good guide and, you are able to facilitate, an experience of wellness while you're going out there. And that's one of the things I've done with our Tree of Life adventure that's really unique here. So we bring people to this tree because, well, it's one of the last true old growth in this forest. It's about 900 years old. It's a very grounding place. Different than the ocean. The ocean is moving, it's flowing, and this is in its own subtle way. It's, we don't necessarily see that unless the wind blows. Yeah, that stillness that it brings into your heart when you're in the forest. That's why I love this tour, particularly coming up here, is because you do get the best of both worlds. You're experiencing that flow, out on the ocean with the marine mammals and the weather and the movement, and then you come into the forest and it's like the energy seems to drop, and it's the only way I can explain it is it's a sense of serenity, a sense of stillness, and a sense of peace. You get a real sense of peace in the forest, especially when you're spending time with something so ancient. Like when you're in the forest and when you're out on the ocean, there's such a profound beauty that I feel like you can see yourself in that. You can see your true nature, and I feel like my Métis heritage, that, understanding is built into me. It's hard to describe. It's a part of me.
I would love people to understand that an awful lot of this province is underwater. What you don't see is what is growing and moving underneath the water. We drive through these beautiful mountains and look at the trees and everything. We see what's above the water, but we don't look at what is equally as beautiful and as vibrant and alive as what is under the water. And it is, when we talk about global warming and all of these things, it is all part of the same picture. Things are changing just as much under the water as they are above the water. People aren't seeing that. They're, yes, we're talking about microplastics and all of these sort of things, but most of what people are talking about are in the top 12 feet of water. It's not what's going on underneath that. If people actually had the ability to see what was going underneath the water, it would amaze them as to how many neat and beautiful things are down there, just as many as that are above. My life is a little unique because I get to touch both sides of the industry, the working on the water and working on the land. The harbors in Campbell River are a lifeblood for many of the businesses in Campbell River. It is a form of infrastructure as important as a SkyTrain in Vancouver. For the amount of product and people that are moved by water, it's amazing. People don't see it, but it's just like the transit system in a large city. We get our logs and our steel and our ore and our everything is all transported by water. And we need docks for not only the service industry vessels, but even those larger vessels that do the transporting. It's still a good mix of pleasure, commercial, and commercial fishing vessels. It's still a working harbor so that fishers from other areas can come here and use our docks and our wharves, and that it's still fairly open to the public to be able to walk around and look at boats and things in the downtown core. It's not all chain linked off or whatever, and it's a pleasant place to be. This is the Campbell River South Wharf, working off of a standard wharf head, which is 20 feet out of the water at the moment. On this side of the harbor, we have a lot of the smaller fishing vessels and most of our pleasure fleet, including the majority of our sailboats. It's a working harbor, so there's a gentleman getting his herring skiff ready right now down here in the harbor, but there's an awful lot of still mixed vessels from pleasure to commercial. So this is the North Wharf in Campbell River. We have a southern half to the harbor and a northern half to the harbor. This is entered from the drive down float, and on this we keep our bigger boats. We have a herring skiff and a gill netter. We have a long line vessel and many more. As we go down the docks, we have a working boat. This is for long lining for cod and halibut. This is one of our seine boats. It's owned by a First Nations family in Campbell River, and he fishes on both the north coast and the south coast and herring with this boat. On that side of the harbor, we have a collection of trollers and longliner, all commercial fishing vessels that fish from Queen Charlotte Islands to Barkley Sound, all the way around the coast. The number of commercial vessels in this harbor has decreased steadily from the 1990s to today. This harbor is just lucky that it has a lot of families that still are in the fishing industry. So therefore, we still have a good number of commercial vessels. Back in the 70s and 80s, we were as many as 7 seine boats wide and 60 to 70 gill netters on each finger during fall fishing or sockeye fishing in Johnstone Straits. Due to license reductions and restrictions, single gear typing, and all of the buybacks and everything, we now don't see any times when there's more than 10 or 15 seine boats and 60 or 50 or 60 gill netters total in the harbor. So the number of commercial fishing vessels has dropped drastically, which has allowed us to create space for some of the commercial vessels, such as the tugboats, water taxis, dive boats, and other that need a place to be. Working on the water is as dangerous as any other high-impact industry, whether you're talking about construction or anything else. It's uncontrolled. It's an uncontrolled marine environment that you can't regulate to being safe. It's not a piece of cement floor. The hardest days that we have in the fishing and the marine family is when we have storms and huge losses. And numerous times in my career, which is going over 45 years now, I've had days where I've lost many friends, not just 1 or 2, but many. And whether they're customers or really close friends doesn't really matter, because it affects a lot of communities. It doesn't just affect Campbell River or Port Hardy, it can affect like all over. And it's difficult when we have loss. And usually it's caused by storms or catastrophes. The most challenging thing that we've come across on a day-to-day basis is different government regulations and the inability to be up to date and complete. We don't know from one minute to the next what a minister is going to do or a department is going to do. They come down with their consultation that they've already had, and here's the rule. We don't really know 6 months in advance when the halibut opening is going to be, or when the herring allotments are going to be given, or whether there's going to be fishing in Barkley Sound. We don't know that until short terms. It's also the rules and regulations that change with what is required on a vessel and what you need to operate those vessels and things like that. It's all regulation that comes down from above that isn't conveyed easily or maybe with enough time to deal with it. It impacts everybody because it is impossible for the fishermen to plan 2 to 3 years in advance. It's impossible for the tugboaters and the people that are moving products to know when they're going to have things in certain locations. All of the different industries that use the water for their transportation and for their livelihoods, the rules are constantly changing on them. My business model has changed to Red Net because there is 1/10 the number of commercial fishers on the water working now as there was 25 years ago. And of those that are working on the water, almost all of them are strapped for monies to be able to buy the gear to go fishing, whether they have to first lease the quotas to go fishing or the money in protein is just not that great. The splitting the pie up to repair their vessels and to make them safe or to buy gear and still take a paycheck home, it's difficult now. It's not a dream job that it was back in the 80s where you could go fishing for the summer and take the rest of the year off and go skiing. Now you basically, it's just a 2-week job here and a 2-week job there, and it's not the gravy train it was at one point. But there's, like I said, there's 1/10 the number of fishermen. There should be 10 times more fish for those guys, but it didn't go that way. Red Net has such a bright future ahead of it. It can expand into so many different directions as the people change. It's amazing how many different avenues we travel down, whether it be arts and craft, or whether it be sports fishing, or whether it just be the weekend warriors going camping. It can be all of those things, but there are not a lot of people left that actually import and build nets for everything from scientific work to commercial fishing. I'm kind of like to pat myself on the back of being one of the few people left with the knowledge of how to design and build structured seines and other types of gill net products, et cetera, for commercial fishing. Because it is a dying breed, people don't want to sit down and tie dots and do what we used to do in the net lofts on the coast. So we've been involved in this town for almost 45 years. We used to hang over 100 herring nets a year, and now we may do 1 or 2. We used to go through 10 to 20,000 pounds of seine netting a year, and now we go through maybe 1,000. We've also branched out into things like garden netting and driving ranges and other products for sports, batting cages, people's backyards. So the product is still being used a lot, and we're still part of the overall picture.